Hi guys, Ray here from City Fan TV, another fantastic location in France. A bit windy today, see the horses in the background, very, very nice indeed. Today I'm going to talk football finances, and I know you guys have heard me talk a lot about finances in the past, but it's really, really important to talk about football finances and finances in general, because once again on social media you get a plethora of fans who have absolutely no idea about what they're talking about. They haven't got a Scooby-Doo, and if you try and help people and, dare I say, educate them a little bit, some of them, they throw it back in your face, and it's sad that it's sad that you get so many people who don't know what they're talking about, and they think they're on the right side because there's so many of them, if you get what I mean. Anybody new to the channel, it'd be fantastic if you could subscribe and help us to get to 600 subscribers before the season starts, and hit that bell icon so you're notified as soon as new videos come out. Right, football finances and finances in general, and I'm not going to be comprehensive. I'm just going to give you some basics to get going, to be better informed and to be better educated. If you want a lot more information, you can go and see some of the videos I've done in the past. The latest Bolt from the Blue podcast, we talked about finances there quite extensively with Colin Savage. And that's kind of where I'm going to start off, is one point Colin made. Let's talk about cash. Okay, cash is great, yes, cash is fantastic, but it's not the be all and end all. Okay, my starting point for all this was seeing loads of fans talking about the fact that City made £215 million in prize money last season, and they've already made, let's say, £100 million of sales this season, selling players, and they said, well, that's 315 million quid. That's more than enough. That's more than enough to pay for Jack Grealish and Harry Kane. Let's say the combined is 250 million for them. They said it's more than enough. Why? What's the problem? And it's like, guys, have you got no brains? Because don't City have expenses too? Our wage bill last season, or last accounts, was £351 million. That's a lot more than the cost of the cost of Jack Grealish and Harry Kane, but it's a lot more than that prize money and the sale of players put together. So people just don't have a clue. Okay, now cash, as I said, cash is important. Some people say there's that phrase, cash is king, but cash is important. But as I said, it's not everything, because as Colin Savage said, you can take out loans if you a bit strapped for cash. You can take out loans. City do that. I think City Football Group have taken out a huge loan recently for various reasons. But you can take out a loan, or you can, other way to raise cash is factor your debt or future sales. And basically what that means is two options. In lots of businesses factor their debt. For instance, you make some sales, and your client might be paying in 30 days or 60 days. That's the agreed terms that you're giving them, but you want that cash now. You can sell that debt on, or debt factoring, invoice financing, whatever. So I might have a debt of, say, 10 grand. Someone owes me 10 grand, but I know they're not going to pay me for 3 months because that's just who they are and the kind of organisation they are, whatever. I can sell that on. So instead of I can sell it on to somebody for, let's say for argument's sake, it's a 10 grand debt. I can sell it on for £9,500. So someone will advance me the £9,500, and as part of that extra 500 that's missing is their fee for doing so. And City, and basically pretty much all clubs, what they do, they sell future ticket sales, for instance. So they look at it and say, for argument's sake, City, let's say City expect to get £50 million in from ticket sales this season. They can sell that in advance of actually getting the money to a finance company, a bank, whatever it is, and they might sell that for, let's say, £47 million. So they get the money up front, they get the money right now, they get that £47 million, and the £3 million difference, 50 to 47, is the money that's their profit for the finance company. That's how they make their money. Now, if City don't get to 50 million, then they probably have to repay some of that. So let's say City only get 45 million, then they'd have to give 5 million back. I guess that's pretty much in its simplest form how it works. So as I said, cash is important, but it's not everything, okay? Can move on to a really important document for financial fair play, and pretty much the only important document for financial fair play is the profit and loss account. Now the profit and loss account, it's really taking a look back at what's happened over the previous 12 months of the accounting period. Yeah, usually 12 months it is. So it takes a look back at what's happened in the last year, what's occurred. And it is, profit and loss, income and expenditure. It's your income minus your expenditure in basic terms. But it's not as simple as that, because it's not as simple as looking at actually what's actually occurred, because there are some expenses that have not been incurred in the last year, and I'll go through them. I'm talking about things like amortisation and stuff that has to be included in the accounts, but might have been incurred a few years ago actually, when we talk about cost of players. And let's talk about how you account for players in a set of accounts. Okay, you've got the balance sheet, which is basically a snapshot. On this day, this is the current state of affairs. This is these are our assets, these are our liabilities. That's the balance sheet. And when you buy an asset, it will go into the balance sheet at whatever the price is. So let's use an easy one. Let's use Harry Kane. Let's say it costs City £100 million. Okay, he'll go into the balance sheet at £100 million. Okay. And we will, in effect, depreciate him, or in accounting terms for these purposes, it's called amortisation. You hear that word time and time again. We amortise his cost over the length of his contract. So basically, you don't put all that £100 million through the accounts in the year that you bought him. You share it. There's different ways to do it, but we do it equally. So we share it over the life of his contract. So if he's got a 4-year contract, that's 100 million divided by 4. It's £25 million each season over those 4 years will go in the accounts as amortisation, as an expense. It's not physically paid, because we physically paid the money or whatever. But that's how it works. If he has a 5-year contract, this is one of the reasons to have longer contracts for accounting purposes, then it's 100 million divided by 5. That's £20 million each year. Amortisation will go into the accounts as an expense. Okay, 6 years, work it out guys, 100 divided by 6 is about 16.66 million each year. So you can reduce the amortisation by increasing the length of the contract. That can have disadvantages as well, because you might end up, if the player refuses to leave after 4 years and maybe he's past his sell-by date, you might still have to be paying his wages, so it can come back to bite you later on. But that's basically how amortisation works. Now, what can also happen, it can, it's a bit odd the way football finances are, is, if I've got a young player, or let's say I bought a player, a young player, let's say Ferran Torres, we bought him for 20 million quid. Now, you might think after 2 or 3 years, his value might rocket, and you might think, well, he's worth 60 million, but it doesn't make any difference. We don't revalue the asset. Now, in the wider accounting world, we might be revaluing that asset upwards for the increase in value in Ferran Torres, but in accounting purposes for football finances, we don't seem to be doing that, and we just carry on, writing his expense off, as I said, the amortisation every single season. The next thing I want to talk about is accounting for sales. Now, a lot of people look at it and say, well, let's pick something out of thin air. Let's pick Bernardo Silva. Let's say he cost us £40 million, roughly £40 million, okay? And he's been on let's say a 5-year contract. Okay, he's been here for, if I remember correctly, 4 years. So he would have, if we're just looking at in simplistic forms, 40 million divided by 5 is 8 million a year amortisation. He'd be actually on our books with a net, it's called a net book value, 40 minus 32. He's been here for 4 seasons times 8, so he's on our books at 8 million quid. That's his value, his net book value. Okay, now we might sell him for 60 million quid. Okay, now some people will look at that and say, well, we bought him for 40, we sold him for 60, we made 20 million pounds profit. Cash terms, yes, that might be the way, but in accounting terms, it's not how it's done at all. So we'd look at that we actually need to look at his net book value. So let's say we sold him for 60. Remember I said his net book value is 8 million. We will actually make an accounting profit of 52 million pounds. That's huge, okay? And people don't understand that. People don't understand that at all. They look at that and say, a lot of people just look at it and say we make 20 million profit. No, accounting purposes, and that's what matters. That's what matters for financial fair play purposes. It's accounting rather than cash, okay? And so we make a huge profit of 52 million pounds on Bernardo Silva on those numbers. Another thing to look at, and it's always important, is wages. People seem to forget about wages when you buy players, I'll give you an example. When we're looking at the wages at the moment, let's say Sergio Aguero, I can't remember his exact number, whether he was on 250 or 325, it's around 300 grand a week. Let's say Harry Kane and Jack Grealish come in and we're paying them a combined 400,000 a week. I look at it simplistically and say, well, we saved 300 grand on Aguero, 100 grand on Bernardo if he leaves, and that kind of cancels itself out. But it's always important to look at other things besides wages, like agents' fees. People ignore agents' fees and signing on bonuses. Well, they're a cost as well, So all these transfers you see and the numbers you read are usually things like, this is the price, and then there's some add-ons, and some people have the price and some people have the add-ons as well, include that in the transfer price. But no one tends to include the agent fee. No one tends to include signing on bonuses or any other commissions paid. Look at Haaland. Okay, let's look at Haaland as an example. Let's say, for argument's sake, Haaland gets sold for 160 million quid. Okay, his agent's getting 20 million quid. Well, that's an actual cost to the club buying him. And his dad's apparently going to get 20 million quid. That's another cost. And if he gets a 10 million pound signing on bonus, his actual transfer price, the total price, is 210 million quid, not 150 or 160. Like Paul Pogba, he was rumoured to have cost United 89 million pounds. Well, actually, Mina Raiola got, 20 million euros as well, or 20 million quid. And, there's probably signing on bonuses and other stuff. So it's not so simple as just looking at that headline figure that people throw out there. So lots of things that are really, really important. And basically, the way I look at things is you can't look at stuff in isolation, okay? Let's have a turn around and walk back. You can't look at 1 year in isolation. I'll give you an example. Listening to Villa fans at the moment, Villa fans are saying, we spent 100 odd million pounds last summer. Was it 120, 125 million? And it looks like they're going to spend 120 to 140 million pounds this summer on players. There's Buendou's already there. There's Leon Bailey's come. They put a new bid in for James Ward-Prowse, and they're trying to get Todd Cantwell from Norwich City. Now, and they say, we can afford this, our owners are rich. Well, it doesn't work like that. Yeah, you've got to satisfy FFP. You've got to live off what you earn. You've got to live off your income. You can't just, throw money into a club and pass FFP because you've invested 200 million pounds into the club. You've got to have the income to cover your expenses, okay? And as I said, you can't look at it as just one year, okay? You've got to look at the amortisation, we come back to that, and other expenses that don't fall into, let's get this right, the expenses you may have incurred years ago that you're still being accounted for this year. For instance, that 120 million they spent last season on players. Let's say they put them on 5-year contracts. So each year, 24 million pounds, 120 divided by 5, if I'm right. No, sorry. Yeah, 120 divided by 5, it's 24 million pounds. Each year, 24 million pounds of amortisation is hitting their accounts each year while those players are there. And their wages as well. Their wages will be hitting the accounts. Let's just pick a number for the wages of, let's say, that's another 25 million pounds. So approximately 50 million pounds is hitting the accounts every single season for those players from last season, okay? And it's going to hit the accounts this season. and it's going to hit every season whilst they're there. Now, if Villa go out and spend another £120 million this year, okay, that's going to be something similar. So that's an extra £50 million is going to hit their accounts every single year. Last year and this year put together, that's £100 million every year. Now, you've got to have the revenue, the income to cover those numbers. Yeah, you've got to have them. And yes, if they sell Jack Grealish, let's say they sell Jack Grealish this summer for £100 million, and since he cost them nought, they'll get £100 million as a profit on the sale of an asset. Actually, that will cover last year's numbers that appear in this year's accounts and this year's numbers that appear in this year's accounts. That will actually wipe out that 100 million. But then they've got to do it again next year. They've got to if this is how you're going to get your income statement up, your revenues up, then you're going to have to do this every year. And go back to City, obviously, we're City fans. This is how City do it. All these sales of young players, academy players, and I know people complain that Cheeky's selling them on the cheap, but this is the business model City have. Okay, all these young players that have been sold, like Ilic, like if you want to include Angelino, Lucas Nemecha, there's going to be probably Yangel Herrera, Pedro Porro, and one or two more, Harrison and all that. It's part of City's business plan. It's our business model. So what we do, we sell all these players every year and we make some, let's say, 50 or 60 million pounds profit, because most of these cost us either nothing or virtually nothing. And we make significant profits on the sale in the accounts. So every year we get ourselves, let's say, 50 or 60 million pounds, which help us with financial fair play. So let's look at Jack Grealish and Harry Kane. Let's say we get the pair of them. Let's not worry about the wages, because I said the wages are going to be netted off by Aguero and Bernardo leaving. Okay, but let's look at their amortisation. It's cost us, for argument's sake, 250 million quid for these players. 5-year contracts. The amortisation is £50 million a year. So we need to find that £50 million a year, and actually we get it from the sale of players. But you've always got to, if you're going to keep on spending, you've got to keep on replacing every year. You've got to keep increasing your income or your profits on sale of players every year, because when you sell those players, it only hits your accounts once, and that's this year. Okay, so next year you've got to pay that 50 million amortisation somehow. Yeah, you've got to cover it somehow. And if you sell £50 million worth of, if you get £50 million worth of profit next year, that covers them. But if you go out and buy some new players next year, you've got to keep covering it. You just got to sit back and think a little bit that you've got to keep bringing in new money. And that's how I look at it every year. I say, how much can we spend or reasonably spend? And it's usually, I've always said we can spend 300 million quid, because split over 6 years, that's 50 million quid a year, and I think City can afford that. But you've always got to be bringing in new money, and that's why you've always got to be increasing your revenues or cutting your costs one way or the other. Well, there you go, guys. I mean, probably went on a little bit longer than I initially intended. I thought I'll try and squeeze this in about 10 or 12 minutes. If you want to get into the bottom of finances, you can go and read stuff that Presswich Blue's written. You can go and follow the Swiss Ramble. Very good stuff there. Very detailed stuff from the Swiss Ramble on Twitter. You can follow someone like Kieran Maguire. Listen to his podcast, read his book on the price of football. So there's lots of different places to go. You can ask me questions. I'm quite happy to pass on bits of accounting knowledge that I remember from doing my exams and working as an accountant many years ago, guys. Many years ago. I qualified fully in 1994, so it's a very long time ago. I'm going to twist around. You can just see this here. It's almost, if you can see that there, it's almost a kilometre long, that. Probably 3/4 of a kilometre, over half a mile. So there's lots of different ways, places that you can go look to get more information. And finances are, You know, most of the concepts I think are quite simple, quite straightforward. If you're prepared to have an open mind, prepared to listen, prepared to do a little bit of reading, and I think it's far better to go into an argument prepared rather than far too many people I see just say, well, you know, throw out numbers and they have no idea what they're talking about. Hopefully you've learned something from this little video. If you want to know more, ask me and I'll do more videos on finances if you want. Guys, if you're new to the channel, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe. Help us try and get to 600 subscribers before the season starts, and hit that bell icon so you're notified as soon as new videos come out. See you around, Blues.